This is the European History Lecture for Friday, December 3rd, 2021. We are in the middle of the philosophical Enlightenment, and we have studied this spiritual and moral and intellectual reaction against the pretensions of absolutist monarchs. Well, about the pretensions of absolutist monarchs, because honestly, Thomas Hobbes' Leviathan is not a criticism of absolute monarchy. In some ways, it's a defense of it. At least of the need for a strong government to control the savage impulses that exist within us. Without those laws provided by a strong government, life would be short, mean, and brutal. Please do make sure that you have your notes out. The next philosopher is John Locke, who in his two treatises on government talks about God-given, inalienable, natural rights. They are God-given, so man cannot take them away. They are inalienable, in that he argues that it is self-evident that we are born with these rights implicit in our nature. These rights are life. We are born. We are not allowed to take the lives of others on our own authority. Except in self-defense, the lives of the people around us are sacrosanct. They are not to be trifled with. Liberty. If, as Christianity says, all people have value and are therefore an ends as well as means to another person's end, and if all people, as Enlightenment philosophers say, can learn reason, then people can handle freedom. Then people should have the widest possible scope of liberty and freedom in their lives. They do not need, if they embrace reason, and if they embrace the liberty of themselves and the sanctity of the lives of those around them, people can be trusted to be responsible stewards of their own freedom and of the freedom of the republic or of the society. Charles I and other absolute monarchs and defenders of absolute monarchy said that democracy is a Greek drollery that says that there are very uncommon virtues in very common men. Yep. Locke, in a completely unsarcastic, unhumorous, unironic way, says absolutely. Human beings are created with a mind. Human beings are created with the capacity to choose good or evil. Human beings are created with capacities for rational, logical thought. And if human beings, a sufficient critical mass of citizens within any society, are self-regulating, they need not be regulated by a higher authority beyond a very limited point. Alexis de Tocqueville is a Frenchman who wrote about a trip he made to the United States in the 1820s. So this is about 40 years after the country is established. De Tocqueville's book, Democracy in America, is a classic about the American Republic as seen through the eyes of a Frenchman who pined for some of the good things about the French Revolution. And what he said was that one of the most remarkable things is that in the midst of a gaping wilderness, hundreds of miles away from the nearest lawman or courthouse, most Americans, most of the time, do the right thing. He talks about how in Europe that would never be trusted to happen, because de Tocqueville came from a country that still had peasants. as well as aristocrats, and a small middle class in between. And peasants had been ruled by the aristocrats from Roman times. The idea of giving everyday people in Europe freedom is one of the things that the French and American revolutions were about. But the French Revolution ended in failure, and it ended in Napoleon's dictatorship. And ultimately, Napoleon was defeated. But he is using America in the 1820s as an example of how it is possible for people to choose to be self-regulating, responsible adults. Hobbes would never trust that. Hobbes insisted that the dark sides of human nature are so powerful, so seductive, so pervasive, that to expect most people, most of the time, to resist the temptation to rage or lust or wrath or any of the other dangerous capacities that exist within us is to engage in a Pollyanna-ish hope, walking around the world with rainbow-colored glasses, seeing nothing but the good in men, and that was foolish. Ideas like this is what made you free, and what make me free. Ideas like this, backed up by experience. Locke writes the English Bill of Rights of 1689, which the Parliament asks for and passes as a result of the Glorious Revolution and the establishment of the Protestant monarchy of William and Mary, 1688. Any questions about Hobbes and Locke or their ideas, comments, criticisms, whatever? Yeah.
How many people supported Hobbes' ideas?
Oh, Hobbes' ideas are still powerful. Most people consider them to be grim. Most people who are idealists don't like Hobbes because Hobbes' notions appeal more to a person's fears and suspicions than their hopes and ideals. Idealists don't like seeing the world in such a cynical way. But anyone who has ever seen human beings lose the self-control that we usually have, anyone who has ever seen a crowd become a mob, which I have, anyone who has ever seen genuinely evil acts, which I have, the famous statement that any society is only 3 hungry days away from revolution is something Hobbes would definitely agree with. That notion, and it's an axiom, I don't know who said it, somebody obviously originally did, is that if you take the most civilized, nice, lovely high culture anywhere and cut off the food supply for 3 straight days without any hope of that food supply being restored, we will not react as our best selves. We will react with barbarity. We will react with selfishness and violence, and people will not only hoard toilet paper, but they'll kill for toilet paper. If a neighbor is seen to have toilet paper, they'll break into their home and take it. And if anyone steps against them, they'll club them to death. I mean, this is a dark way of looking at people. I don't necessarily believe that, by the way. I believe human nature can lead us to be ravening hyena devils if we let it happen. But at some point, each individual has to choose whether to resist the mob and absent themselves from it or give in to the mob. If you give in to the mob, you lose your ability for a temporary time to discern between right and wrong. And the French Revolution is going to see that. Human beings, individual human beings with judgment, with morals, with character. Individual human beings subsumed into a mob that literally rips people limb from limb and revels in it, which is not something most individuals would say, that's what I want to do with my afternoon. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
JeanJacques Rousseau is a person whose ideas are different than Locke's or Hobbes. Rousseau is a French idealist. And Rousseau's central notion is of the social contract. So if you don't see it in your notes, please make sure you write next to Rousseau, the social contract. The social contract. The social contract. And what the social contract is, Rousseau, like many people in the Enlightenment, is trying to figure out natural law. Natural law. And they don't want to use authoritative sources like Scripture in order to discern the moral laws of the universe. What they want to do is observe those laws in action. And by watching life happen and watching human beings happen, figure out what in fact might be natural laws. I realize I'm being confusing. I'll get there. So what Rousseau does, like many idealists and Enlightenment philosophers and poets afterwards, is they try to imagine man and his humanity in a natural state, in a state of nature, before we were warped by civilization, before we were changed by society. What would man in his natural state be like in a state of nature? This is almost Edenic, looking back at a proverbial Garden of Eden, an enlightened time where the noble savage, and this is a notion that comes out of this, the noble savages of the world live without crime, without want, without poverty. It's the same sort of notion that anarchists have today, when they say, if only we got rid of government, everyone would be free, and because there's no government oppressing you, you have no reason to rebel, so people will choose to be good to one another. Which I think is quite idealistic. But I'm a cynical old fellow. The notion of the noble savage, of man in a state of nature, is an attempt to take civilization out of the individual and try to distill what good qualities exist in human beings despite civilization. The presumption is, if the environment that people grow up in and live in is not crowded, is not poverty-stricken, is not desperate, is not violent, is not fearful, then human beings will be better than we actually have been. Because those things that provoke us to desperation, to acts of fear and violence and anger, won't be there. Will be nicer. Like the difference between a dog that is raised to fight in a pit and a dog that's raised to be a family pet. Dogs that are raised to fight in a pit are not treated well. They learn to kill, and they learn to fight, and they learn not to trust, which is not the way that you raise a puppy when you have kids in the house, not if you're sane. So Rousseau says, in a state of nature, what were we like? Unlike many of the poets and other idealists, Rousseau does not see us as fundamentally savage or fundamentally noble. But Rousseau does say that we, in our state of savagery, are needy. We have limited power. We may be able to hunt and gather. We, men, may have been able to go out and get meat and skins, and women would gather vegetables and small creatures from the local environment. and provide for our basic needs. Yes, that may be so, but to do anything civilized, we need to come together. We need to work together. So man creates society, and society has laws and rules. The price we pay for the benefits of society is a loss of autonomy. We have to give up certain freedoms in order to benefit from working together. So we make a social contract with one another. In that social contract, we agree to work in concert with one another, in harmony with one another, together with one another. And in order to make this work, when we get angry at one another, we can't club each other until their heads cave in. We can't profligately abuse one another. We can't take one another's stuff. In order for our society to function, in order for us to work together, we have to behave in a trustworthy fashion towards one another. We have to restrain our dark nature. We have to restrain our ability to commit murder or violence. We have to control the darker impulses. And we have to give up the notion that we have a right to do anything we want. When we make the social contract, we give over a certain degree of our freedom and our autonomy to the society and its rules and its government and its laws. And then we get to benefit from being part of the economy, from being able to work together, to build bridges, to build irrigated farmland, to build city walls, to trade with one another with symbolic things like money, to interact with one another as something other than violent groups. The social contract is about the individual choosing voluntarily at some distant point in the past, choosing to give up total freedom in return for a degree of security. So, in modern politics, people who tend to be more progressive or left-leaning will tend to argue that we each are incapable of doing anything without benefit of society. You may have a new invention, but that invention has to be brought to customers across roads that taxpayer money builds. It has to be safe according to government rules about food and products. The money that we use is backed by government power. The taxes that you pay for the law and order that allows for the peaceful exchange of goods and services. In other words, as President Obama once said, you didn't build that. We built that. That being business and wealth. President Obama, back about 9-10 years ago, then went on to talk about how individuals never did anything in our society without the benefit of the collective, of the community. And that only with the benefit of the collective or the community can individuals thrive. So Rousseau tends to be the Enlightenment philosopher that is most beloved by progressives and by liberals, in the sense that Rousseau talks about the social bonds that tie us together and the moral imperative that if you benefit from society, you have to obey its laws and conform to some degree, with those laws. Questions, thoughts, ideas? Okay. Voltaire. Voltaire is the Saturday Night Live of Enlightenment philosophers. Voltaire is a sarcastic, humoristic, ironic social critic. He does things like write the philosophical dictionary, which is not really about identifying the meaning of words. Let's see if I can find. Yeah. Here are some quotes from this philosophical dictionary. They are on this page of your notes. You're already there, I think. If you, oh wait, no, it's the reverse. It's this page here. On the top it says democracy, natural rights, and on the bottom it says quotes from Voltaire's philosophical dictionary. And here are just a few. Common sense is not so common. These are quips, but they are biting quips that have some thought behind them. Common sense, I can tell you, is an uncommon virtue. Okay, our wretched species is so made that those who would walk on the well-trodden path always throw stones at those who are showing a new road. In other words, conventional people don't like individuals. They don't like free thinkers. They don't like creativity. And Voltaire would know it because Voltaire perceived himself to be persecuted by conventional people most of his life. The best is the enemy of the good. Now, this is just wisdom. The best is the enemy of the good. One way of looking at this is that if you're doing a job and you say, well done, good enough, and leave it, that may not be your best work. Your best work is only produced when you are unsatisfied and revise until it becomes better. So if you say good enough, that's the enemy of the best. What can you say to a man who tells you he prefers obeying God rather than men, and that as a result, he's certain he'll go to heaven if he cuts your throat? Fanaticism is the absence of thought. It is irrationalism. During the 20th century, fascism, National Socialism, and communism all practice variants of irrationalism. Any religious cult will practice a variant of irrationalism. And if a person genuinely believes that they serve God and your death is necessary, they'll kill you and won't bat an eye, because irrational fanaticism is a powerful, powerful force. Okay. The perfect is the enemy of the good. We've just talked about that. Discord is the great ill of mankind, and tolerance is the only remedy for it. Okay. Do we agree about the important things in life and the meaning of those things? No. Not unless we were brainwashed or punished into conformity. One of the glories and curses of humanity is that we think for ourselves. And if we think for ourselves, we will inevitably come up with a different set of proportions, a different set of values, a different set of answers. So discord is normal. If you believe that your way is the one true way, and I believe that my way is the one true way, and we don't have the same ways, we might get into it, and we might fight. That's discord. And discord isn't a bad thing. It's better than lying and submitting and putting up with people thinking that you agree with them when you really don't. Discord is at least an honest thing. But one answer to the problem of never-ending which people do because we don't agree, is to be genuinely tolerant and to say, fine, you disagree with me. I think you're wrong, but I feel no reason I feel no need to grab you by the throat, put you up against a wall, and firing squad you. I feel no need to punish you for your disagreement. That tolerance is not easy. And I think one of the worst things about my progressive and liberal friends and neighbors is they look at the history of the West, and more particularly at the history of the United States, and they see, well, at one time we kept slaves. At one time we had most of us as peasants, which is practically slaves. Not entirely, but practically. We didn't let women have the same rights as men. Lower class men couldn't vote because they didn't own enough property. People were bigoted. People are bigoted. They see our society through its worst aspects from a modern standpoint. But I have seen in my lifetime it go from being acceptable to say something like, I'm free, white, and over 21, as an answer to somebody trying to tell me I can't do something, which was common parlance when I was in high school. And today it sounds incredibly racist, but in those days it wasn't meant that way. It was a way of speaking. And people said things like that unconsciously. And we have, for better or worse, and I think largely for better, gone to a point where, yeah, that is kind of racist. It's kind of obnoxious. I don't think it should be forbidden, but I do think that people will look at you funny if you say things like that, and maybe they won't want to be associated with you. And that's fine. That's voluntary. I think that our ability to tolerate people has grown. I think that our society has become much more tolerant, for better or worse. And I'm proud of that. In any case. If you have thoughts, I assume you'll raise your hands and offer your thoughts, your opinions. One always begins with the simple. Then comes the complex, and by superior enlightenment, one often reverts in the end to the simple. Such is the course of human intelligence. There is an elegant simplicity even to the most complex of ideas. And what a good person, a good communicator can do is distill the simplicity in complexity and respect both. Again, I'm afraid I'm just being babbling. I hope you get that. If you don't, ask. So, it is the human condition that to wish for the greatness of one's fatherland is to wish evil for one's neighbors. The citizens of the universe would be a citizen of the universe would be the man who wishes his country never to be either greater or smaller, richer or poorer. So this is Voltaire's idea against nationalism. One merit of poetry few persons will deny, it says more and in fewer words than prose. And with poetry, you can say things that you can't otherwise put into words. It is proved that things cannot be other than they are. For since everything was made for a purpose, it follows that everything is made for the best purpose. This is something that he explores in his book Candide. In Candide, which again is absolutely satirical, and which many of you will read before you graduate, if you haven't already read it. In Candide, Voltaire has a character who is a foolish philosopher, who keeps saying, whenever horrible things happen, this is the best of all possible worlds. The Bulgars come in and conquer the country. This is the best of all possible worlds. We're prisoners of war. This is the best. Our ship, we're put on ship as prisoners, as slaves. This is the best of all possible worlds. Our ship sinks. This is the best of all possible worlds. And there is this sense that Voltaire is playing with both the foolish optimism of a person who genuinely believes that this is the best of all possible worlds and the possibility that they may be right. But Voltaire is cleverer than I am, so maybe he means things that I am not even aware of. I acknowledge the possibility. The truths of religion are never so well understood as by those who have lost the power of reasoning. And this goes on to talk about faith as the enemy of reason, reason as the enemy of faith, which is something Voltaire believed, but I certainly don't. I'm not going to go through all of these. Just going to mention a few others. Let's see. There are no sects in geometry. In other words, math is pure because opinion doesn't enter into it. Well, I'll get to the last. Voltaire once said, "I have but one prayer." And Voltaire was quite vehemently anti-religious. But he said, "I have but one prayer, that God might make my enemies ridiculous. And behold, it has been granted." Think about that. Voltaire, who criticizes power, who criticizes monarchy as an oppressive thing, also is the darling of monarchs. For example, King Frederick the Great of Prussia, who is, in his own ways, an absolute monarch and a military genius, sees himself as an enlightened monarch. Think about this. If you consider the possibility that government is a force of good, which is a conservative I don't like, but if you believe that government can be a force for good, then the best possible form of government is an absolute monarchy with a good and virtuous king. Why? Because an absolute monarchy with a good and virtuous king has a hero of the nation and of the people, empowered to change everything. By power of fiat, by his authority, he can end unjust laws and make just laws and raise up the low and bring down the mighty and the corrupt. An absolute monarch is someone who can use the scalpel of government to perform surgery on society and cut out the cancer and make everything better. Frederick the Great hosts Voltaire at Sans Souci, his country palace, for months. Voltaire is the personal guest of Frederick the Great, who asks Voltaire about policy, and Voltaire tries offering his wise advice. But it soon becomes clear to both men this is not going to last, because Voltaire can't get past the fact that Prussia is a military state, and Prussia is a monarchy that rules through the power of force. And this king thinks he's being an enlightened monarch, but he's still basically tyrannical. Can you employ a tyrant to bring liberty? Can you employ the force of government in monarchy, which is compulsion, to bring freedom? Ultimately, Voltaire has to leave because he and the king just no longer get along. No questions, no thoughts, nothing. So you all, at this point, can at least get a sense of the differences and the distinct ideas of Hobbes, of Locke, of Rousseau, and of Voltaire. Voltaire is the ultimate social critic. He points out the flaws in things that people take for granted. Okay. I'm just going through this now because it needs to be said. One of the reasons that I teach is to teach the heritage behind the United States Constitution. So, we start with Hammurabi's code of laws, the oldest law code that we know of, which is summarized by an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, a life for a life, among equals. Now, the king's justice was replacing the law of family, which is blood calls out for blood, which is, you hurt my little sister. by giving her an Indian burn. I'm going to hurt you by breaking your arm. Your dad's going to hurt me by cutting off my arm. My dad's going to hurt him by shooting him in the head. His brothers are going to come after my dad and kill my whole family, immediate family. This is the way feuds happen. They are unrestrained and they are always about escalation. Why? Why do you escalate violence in a feud situation, in a situation where families are fighting families? Because terror, ladies and gentlemen, is a form of communication. What do I communicate if I am harsh, overwhelmingly harsh, to anyone who interferes with my family?
Don't mess with me.
Right. And that's street talk, okay? In the Bronx, people speak that language. Don't mess with somebody who is part of my family or crew, because if you do, we will savage you. And it's not about proportional response. It's about overwhelmingly escalatory response. But the king says no. Modern people look at an eye for an eye justice and see a cruel system. There are bumper stickers, an eye for an eye will make the world go blind. No, they don't understand. Hammurabi's code limits justice to what you are found guilty of doing. So if you are found guilty of giving my little sister an Indian burn, the worst that will happen to you is the executioner will walk up, not in personal miss, and give you an Indian burn. It limits justice to what you are found guilty of, if you are social equals. If you are a higher person in the social hierarchy, you can pay money to abuse people lower. If you are lower in the social hierarchy and you interfere with somebody who is higher, you're going to lose body parts or you may die. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, a life for a life among equals. Then there is the Decalogue, the 10 Commandments of Moses. I am the Lord your God. You shall have no false gods before me. Don't make for any graven image. Keep holy the Sabbath day. Honor your father and your mother. You shall not kill. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness. You shall not covet your neighbor's goods or your neighbor's wife. Now, more than half of the 10 Commandments is just good social policy. You don't want people murdering one another or stealing from one another or coveting or committing adultery or lying or any of that. But the law is the heart of the Jewish faith in ancient times. And it is still the heart of the Jewish faith today. The Mosaic Law, the 10 Commandments, influences us. Athenian democracy involves citizens personally involving themselves in government. Every Athenian citizen was a member of their General Assembly. And that means every Athenian citizen could personally decide issues of tax policy, social policy, peace, and war. The Romans established the basis of their legalistic system with the 12 tables. Early in Rome's republic, the plebeian working class went on strike and left the city of Rome to establish their own city on a nearby hilltop. The Roman patricians, the upper class, sent a representative to them after a few weeks of this, saying, "At what price will you return to our city?" The plebeians said, "We are sick of being treated differently under the law from you. You may be rich, we may be poor, but we're all Romans. My blood's just as red as yours, and I will shed it for my country just as likely as you will. So we want the laws written in stone for everyone to see. We want equal justice under the law." And the 12 tables provide that, equal justice under the law. And the law is known by everyone. That's the 12 tables. Judeo-Christian convictions are that human beings are not mere resources, that we are beings made in the image of God. So in spirit, as well as in practice, you can't exploit the people around you. You can't exploit them for sex, you can't exploit them for labor, you can't exploit them to feed the dark impulses that you have that may be sadistic. You have to acknowledge the value and dignity of the human beings around you. This comes from the Judeo-Christian notion of the value of individual human life. The law code of the Byzantine Emperor Justinian recapitulates Roman law, which starts back before the 12 Tables. And Justinian's code of laws will become later a basis for Napoleon's code of laws. And the Napoleonic code of laws is the most common code of laws in the free world. We don't use it here. Our system is based on English common law. But Justinian's code systematizes Roman law and provides a good basis for what will later be the Napoleonic code. Magna Carta, we've already talked about. The king, in a moment of weakness, has to acknowledge that even the king is under the laws, like everyone else, not above them, and that the king must ask the nobles and later the parliament for new monies, which places the king in a relationship with his people that in an absolute monarchy the king does not have. The king is above his people. The Protestant Reformation. For better or worse, politically, the Protestant Reformation encourages people to try to live as religious a life as a monk or a nun can, but in your daily life. This is the Protestant work ethic. To try to live your daily life as a devotion to God. Whether you're a soldier or a barkeep or a maid. And the Protestant Reformation also encourages people to read the Bible. The Bible is translated into the vernacular of several languages, of several peoples, and everyday people are encouraged to struggle with this complex document and read the Bible. The Roman Catholic Church, for all of its virtues, does not encourage its everyday members to read the Bible until the mid-20th century as a part of daily devotions. Not to my knowledge, anyway. The age of absolutism is the king's attempt to take total power. This provokes the Enlightenment. The Glorious Revolution of 1688 and the English Bill of Rights that comes from it are the direct inspiration for the United States' founding fathers. The Enlightenment philosophy of Locke and Rousseau lead to concepts of inalienable human rights that still are with us today, as well as to a constitutional system that provides us with both a social contract that allows us to live in peace, but also liberty, so that the government works for the people and not for the ruling elite. So the Constitution is a product of all of these things. In the United States, we employ English common law rather than the Napoleonic Code. English common law is rooted in the concept of precedence. Precedence is the belief that if we make a decision here and now, that decision will affect similar cases in the future. The Napoleonic Code, based on Roman law and Justinian's Code, is a system of crimes, standards of evidence, and punishments. It is less organic, it develops less from individual judges' decisions, it is more a set of rules for everyone to follow. There's another difference. In English common law, you are presumed innocent until you are proven guilty. So, if you are accused of a crime, what would be a really good crime? Bank robbery. Very hard to be a good bank robber. And I'm your lawyer, and I find out you did it, I'm still going to try to get a not guilty plea. My job is to fight in the court like a knight in trial by combat. And I, as a lawyer, will fight for a plea, for a verdict of not guilty, regardless of your guilt. And the presumption of innocence means that the prosecutor has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that you did it personally. In Napoleonic Code justice, if I am your lawyer and I found out that you did the crime, I am obligated to say guilty with extenuating circumstances. I'm not going to go for a not guilty plea, because a not guilty plea would be harming the truth and harming society. I will go for guilty with extenuating circumstances. Yeah, she did it, but under the circumstances, it made sense. Let's minimize the punishment by minimizing culpability. Also, the presumption is that if you're accused and you're on trial, you have to prove your innocence. That's a totally different standard than the prosecutor having to prove your guilt. You have to prove your innocence beyond a reasonable doubt. That is so much harder. Why? Because English common law is rooted in a concept that individual liberty is more important than the social good. If you have to choose between them, individual liberty is more important than the social good. The Napoleonic Code is based in the Roman concept and the Hammurabi Code concept that the social good is more important than individual justice or individual liberty. For the good of the individual, you are innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. For the good of society, you are guilty unless you prove your innocence. So there are some big differences there. Finally, the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen, which is the great product of the French Revolution, is not a source for the Constitution. First of all, because it comes about after the Constitution, but also because the Declaration of Rights of Man and Citizen was never properly put into practice. It is a document of the hopes of the revolutionaries that quickly devolved into the Terror and then the Great Terror, where the guillotines of France worked overtime to remove the heads of people who were not in harmony with the current moment of the revolution. So what happens in France, spoiler alert, is not going to work out as well as what happens in the United States. We'll talk more about that. Next time, we do mercantilism, the triangle trade, and slavery. Any questions, comments, or thoughts? Remember, Monday. Your case study profile is due. Good luck. Have a good weekend. Ta-ta.